We continue our study of Parshat Yitro, this text about Moshe's father-in-law coming to meet Moshe with his wife, and his wife being Moshe's wife, not Yitro's wife, and Moshe's children, Yitro's grandchildren. When Yitro gets there, Moshe is engaged in judging the Jewish people. They've only been for a short period of time together in the desert, in the wilderness, but there are all sorts of questions that have come up. Is my chicken soup kosher and things like that? As I accidentally put my fleishik knife into my dairy pot? All the questions like that are probably not the questions that Moshe got, but they're bothering him. They're asking him questions day and night. And Yitro recognizes from the get-go that this is not a good idea. We mentioned yesterday whether he's doing it as a father-in-law, as a father, as a grandfather, or for other reasons. He sees that this is not a good idea, and he suggests to Moshe that something different needs to happen, that the Jewish people need to spend their time, that Moshe needs to instruct the people generally about the laws, and then after he instructs them generally about the laws, he has to also appoint judges so that he won't have to sit there. So don't teach a law to one person or two people or three people. Teach the law to 500 people or 800 people or 1,000 people, and then also have more judges so that you don't have to be here by yourself. Because if you're here by yourself, it's going to be a disaster. Bol tibol gamata gama. Right? He says that it's just going to fall. It's going to be destruction. You can't keep a law like that. And one of the great questions that's asked here about this chapter, and there's no necessarily answer to it, is after Yitro makes these suggestions to Moshe, does Moshe just accept them? Or does Moshe go to God and ask God whether he should implement Yitro's system? And that's a very intriguing, very interesting question that's being asked. So does Moshe just take it? It's okay. Does Moshe say, you know what? God is going to give us the law, and Yitro is creating the vehicle, the administration, the bureaucracy that's necessary in order for the law to be given to everybody. But it's not in contrast to God's laws. It's just to help facilitate God's laws. And Yitro advises that the judges be ethical, kind, good, decent, fair people who don't take bribes. So I don't need to ask God, which is one way of looking at it. There are those who say that sort of the Ibn Ezra moves in this direction, but he doesn't say it outright, as opposed to others who say, you know what, the whole Yitro episode happens after Har Sinai. Yitro appears only after Har Sinai. And Yitro, the story is told here, but really he comes about much later, because by that point in time there was already the revelation of Sinai. Moshe had already gone up. Moshe already understood much better the divine will, the divine system of judgment. So Moshe maybe does not have to ask God, because Moshe already understands that Yitro's advice comes in, works together with what God has given us. And it's sort of this intriguing question that we ask here, and it's sort of a larger question that goes on. Just generally, well, outside influences, systems. Can we take a system of study and apply it to the Torah, which we, of course, have done as a Jewish people for generations, whether it be numerical system, understanding numbers and what numbers represent, whether it's legal analysis. We talked yesterday, about Rabbi Akiva as the consummate outsider and his methodology of studying texts differently than many of the other rabbis, which is why he drew such a great following. This all starts here with Yitro. So does Moshe go and ask God, and God says, okay? We don't see that in the text. Does Moshe have an understanding of God? Because the revelation at Sinai has already happened, and said, okay, Yitro, my father-in-law's methodology works together with God's system. It's the vessel, it's the system through which now we can teach the people. Or does Moshe not even consult God? And this is even before Sinai. Moshe listens to his father-in-law. Moshe says this is a good idea, which is much stronger in terms of, if we think about, we have the revelation of God, we have the laws from the Torah, but humanity also plays a part ultimately in how judgment and Judaism as a legal system is going to be represented on earth. It's, sort of an early, if you want to put it, the most well-known piece of Talmud about this is where the rabbis Rabbi Eliezer and the rabbis have a disagreement. Rabbi Eliezer makes all these miracles happen and ultimately says, he says, a voice from the heavens, a bat kol, will come down and say the law is like me, and the bat kol comes down from the heavens and says the law is like Rabbi Eliezer, and the rabbis say lo bashamayim. We don't listen to the bat kol. The Torah was already given to us. We are in charge of the administration of the Torah. God gave His law, and we have to interpret it, and we will decide who is right, who is wrong. I don't care what God says anymore. Now that's that's a much stronger Gemara there. God actually says something. The rabbis disagree with God. God in the end of Gemara says, "Nitzchuni banai, my children have been victorious over me. They understand the legal system. They are the ones who determine the legal system and therefore the legality of how a halacha is going to be determined." But in a sense, you could understand this, it really starts here. Whether Moshe intuits the way that God wants the law, or even more so, Vaishma Moshe lekol chodno, right from the get-go, Moshe hears about it, and he says, this is a great idea. I don't need to ask God for permission to set up this legal system. This legal system is a very, very smart legal system. It's the way in which we are going to work perfectly about how we are going to be able to apply the system, these laws that God has given us. Now, there are those who have a certain sense of nervousness about a Yitro. In certain midrashim, the rabbis sort of question how Yitro gets his own parsha. Yitro has a letter. Other places called Yeter is Yitro. They add the vav to his name. It's like one of the letters of the Yud Hey, the vav and the Hey, the name of God. So why are we giving so much honor to Yitro? Are we honoring converts? Maybe we don't have to worry about outside influences and forces. But it's again coming back to yesterday. Yesterday we talked about Yitro not wanting to be part of the moral corrupt system of Paro, and so his descendants, according to the midrash, the rabbis later sit next to the court system. It also makes sense that they sit next to the court system, the Lishkat Hagazit, the chamber of hewn stone where the Sanhedrin sat in the Beit HaMikdash, because Yitro was the one who came up with the system that ultimately has the Sanhedrin as the chief court, akin to Moshe, almost like they're watching over the Sanhedrin the same way Yitro was watching over Moshe. You guys can't decide everything. You have to have local courts here and there. So the rabbis have some sort of anxiety about this idea of Yitro creating, but the legal system, it seems, comes from a non-Jew, and at least in the order of the parshot, that's the question again here. When does Yitro come? When does this is this after Revelation? Moshe understands it will work with God's system that God has created, or no, it's even before Revelation. Moshe doesn't ask God. Moshe says this is a good system, and it's a wise law code that comes from not only human, but even from a non-Jew. And so it comes down to this sort of intriguing question that we have to ask at time. Did Moshe ask God or not? How much authority? Does he listen just because it's his father-in-law? He wants to be respectful? Does he believe that this is a good system? Does he understand the problems himself? He doesn't consult God, it appears. Um, it raises a number of other interesting ideas. We know that Torah laws is generally from Revelation. We have the 613 mitzvot. We have the mitzvot in the Torah. God gives the mitzvot to the Jewish people. But there's also reason. Not everything is governed by revelation. There's natural, regular laws. There are ethical things that make sense. Legal systems can adapt, as of course our legal system, started 3,000 years ago, has had to adapt over time. And of course, that's part of the idea of the Torah Shebaal Peh, the elasticity, the ability to change, and in terms of, right, it's not stuck. It doesn't have to be stuck in a certain area. And so a lot of these sort of intriguing questions are being first debated here with Yitro creating this system. Let's compare a little bit Yitro versus Sinai. If we look at the sort of the different models, right? What is Sinai? Sinai are absolute commands. God gives them the Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 utterances, and there's no sort of gray area. Lo tignov, right? Do not kidnap. Don't honor your parents. It's absolute commands. It's not negotiable. There's sacred time and ritual. You can't celebrate Shabbat on Tuesday if you wanted. It's law that's rooted in covenant, relation between God and the Jewish people, and not consent. Now, if we think of Yitro's model, what's Yitro's model? Is in a sense, in many ways, the opposite. What does Yitro tell Moshe to do? He tells him to delegate. He tells him to create a system, a hierarchy. He tells him to be efficient. He teaches him about accessibility. You right. You can be accessible to an extent. Judges are chosen based upon their character traits. It's much more similar to regular laws or regular legal system, whether it be ancient Near Eastern law or Roman law or modern courts. In terms of a different, it's about creating a system that's going to work for the average person to be able to, through its efficiency, its accessibility, through its delegation, that's going to be allow the laws to be promulgated and delivered to everybody in a good model. And so when we put the two systems together, what's interesting is the Torah, you could say, insists we need both, right? We need the content from Sinai, which is absolute. God gives command, they're mitzvot, but Yitro gives the form. Yitro gives the vehicle through which to do it. So the law might be absolute, but the way it's administered and the way we give it to people has a certain amount of how are we going to get it to the people. Obviously, there are a lot more complexities on that law. It's not always absolute. There's a lot of gray area in Jewish law, etc., etc. But right, this is sort of a combination again, the legal and the I would say the form and the content, and the two of them come together and are coming from very very different ways. Sort of there are many things to sort of to say about it, but just to sort of to summarize, right? If we think about it, God doesn't rule directly. God tells Moshe, and Moshe tells the people. God is giving the values. The humans are building the institution. The leaders judge other humans. They're going to be mistake. Jewish law is not everything is not always pure and 100%. There's morality. That's brought into it. There's humanity that's brought into it, and that starts here from the get-go. And that's one of the I think the amazing things about this about Yitro here at the time of the revelation is really we put the bigger. Just think about it, whether let's take ourselves out of the weed, whether Moshe told or was told or wasn't told. Either way, we have here very much, if you want to put it as such, almost like Torah Shebaal Peh and Torah Shebichtav. The Torah Shebichtav is absolute. We know what God said. It's the word of God. But Torah Shebaal Peh allows for adaptability, allows for understanding of changing dynamics over time. Right, over 1,000 years ago, Rabbeinu Gershom might say, "Well, the Torah doesn't says you could have multiple wives, but you know what? That's not the best idea anymore today, and prohibits, at least for Ashkenazi Jewry, having more than one wife." That is the humane side, and that's what we start out here as a very important discussion. We have Yitro and Sinai. We have the two of them coming together, and that's going to be, if you want to put it as such, a framework which we have for Jewish law, even now, some 3,000 years later. So, to me, it's sort of a very intriguing discussion when we start to think about Jewish law. That even from the get-go, we have the human and the godly coming together. How much authority is God giving to the human? Is it on behalf of the human? We don't know, but that opens and raises questions which are still debated in the details of Jewish law and how it is applied some 3,000 plus years later.